Welcome to another incredible journey where imagination meets unstoppable determination. Today we dive into an epic story of resilience, courage and triumph as we follow humanity rising from the ashes to reclaim what was once lost, a tale of survival and ultimate victory where the human spirit shines brighter than any star in the galaxy. In a future where Earth has fallen and humanity is scattered across the cosmos, whispers of hope spark a revolution against overwhelming odds. Our story captures the raw power of perseverance, the strength to adapt and the will to conquer the impossible. If you love stories that ignite your spirit and fuel your dreams, then you are in the right place. Get ready to embark on a thrilling adventure filled with unforgettable characters, intense battles, and moments that will leave you inspired and breathless. Make sure you subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a moment of these powerful journeys. Let us grow together, learn together, and conquer together. Your support means everything. Now let us begin the epic tale, Rising from Ashes: How Humans Reclaimed the Universe. The last great war had shattered Earth into a memory. Fires had consumed cities, oceans had swallowed coastlines, and the sky had turned a permanent shade of gray. Those who survived were forced to flee into the stars. Desperate and broken, they scattered among the remnants of ancient colonies, hidden stations, and forgotten planets, clutching onto survival with bloody fingers. Humanity was no longer a dominant force, it was a whisper, a relic of a bygone era. Most alien civilizations saw them as nothing more than scavengers, wandering pests unworthy of notice. But in the deepest corners of the galaxy a flame still burned. Within the heart of every human survivor was a hunger not just to live but to rise, to reclaim the dignity that had been stripped away. Commander Elias Vorn was one of those sparks. He was born in the rubble of the old lunar base, raised on tales of Earth's beauty and humanity's former glory. His parents had died scavenging for resources before he turned 10, leaving him to the mercy of mercenaries and traitors. Yet through hardship Elias learned to lead, to fight, and most importantly to inspire. He gathered others like him, men and women who refused to accept extinction as their destiny. They called themselves the Ashborn, a name whispered first in defiance and later in pride. They moved from derelict ships to crumbling spaceports, surviving on scrap, salvaging technology, and always growing stronger. One night, as the Ashborn camped in the ruins of an abandoned asteroid colony, an old signal reached them, a garbled transmission repeating a single phrase: "The Forge awakens." It was a myth among the scattered humans, a legend about an ancient shipyard built before the fall, capable of crafting weapons of unimaginable power. If it was real, it could be the key to humanity's resurgence. Elias saw it not just as an opportunity but as a destiny. He rallied his people, sending scouts across the sectors, tracing the broken whispers of the signal. Some never returned, devoured by pirate slavers, or worse yet, those who survived brought back fragments of maps, coordinates, and ancient security codes. The journey to the Forge was perilous. The Ashborn had to cross territories controlled by hostile alien syndicates, empires that had long forgotten the threat humans once posed. Their ship, the Nomad, was a patchwork of stolen technology and human ingenuity barely holding together, yet every dented plate and jury-rigged weapon told a story of resilience. As they entered the outer rim of the Forge system, alarms screamed through the Nomad. An alien fleet blockaded the region, their ship sleek and deadly. Elias knew they could not defeat them in open battle, but he also knew the Ashborn were masters of desperation. Under the cloak of ancient asteroid fields and electromagnetic storms, the Nomad danced through enemy lines. Each move was a gamble, every moment a breath away from annihilation. Inside the ship, tension crackled like a live wire, but so did hope. In the shadow of a dead moon they found it, the Forge, vast, silent, and magnificent, even in decay, stretching for miles. It was a testament to human ambition, a floating fortress built with the dreams of a golden age. The Ashborn were not safe yet. Alien patrols swept the region and time was running out. Elias ordered his best engineers to breach the Forge hull while the fighters prepared for the inevitable defense. Every member of the crew knew they might die, yet none hesitated. As the first doors opened, ancient systems flickered to life. Lights that had not shone for centuries illuminated the dark void, revealing vast hangars filled with skeletal ships, dormant drones, and unfinished dreams. For the first time in generations, humanity had found a foothold, not just a place to survive but a place to rebuild, to fight back, to reclaim what was lost. Hope had not been extinguished, it had only been waiting for the right moment to ignite again. And ignite it did. The Forge was unlike anything the Ashborn had ever encountered. Its vast expanse stretched out before them, an almost sacred relic from a time when humans had once ruled the stars. The hangars were filled with half-completed ships and ancient weapons, relics of a civilization long past. The systems, though ancient, hummed with dormant power, waiting for a touch, a spark, to bring them back to life. As Elias Vorn stood at the threshold of the Forge, a sense of awe washed over him, quickly replaced by the urgency of their mission. They were not here to marvel at the past, they were here to reclaim their future. With the ancient shipyard lying in their hands, the Ashborn had found a momentary victory, but they knew it would not last. The alien fleets blocking the Forge system were vast and formidable, and they were bound to discover the breach soon. Elias knew they had little time to waste. He immediately tasked his best engineers with the delicate and dangerous work of reactivating the dormant machines while his fighters prepared for the inevitable assault. Days passed in tense silence, with every move the Ashborn made bringing them closer to their goal, and to destruction. The Forge, though filled with the tools of an ancient civilization, was a complex web of security systems and traps, designed to keep invaders out. But the Ashborn were no strangers to overcoming the odds. Working in shifts, they cracked codes and bypassed security protocols, inching closer to the heart of the Forge. Meanwhile, Elias gathered his crew in the ship's central command room, rallying them with words of encouragement. They had come this far, surviving against all odds, and now they had a chance to turn the tide. "This is our moment," he told them. "For Earth, for every soul who perished, and for those who still believe we can rise again." The crew cheered, their spirits lifted by his words. They had fought to survive for so long, but now they had something greater to fight for, a future. And it was a future that would not be handed to them easily. On the 6th day of their operations, the first signs of alien interference began to emerge. The scanners on the Nomad lit up with warning signals. Enemy ships had entered the system. The Ashborn had no choice but to act quickly. Elias gave the order to begin the activation sequence, and the engineers scrambled to bring the Forge's ancient weapons to life. It was a gamble. They had no idea whether the weapons would function after centuries of disrepair, but they had no other choice. If they were to survive, they needed the Forge to be fully operational, and they needed it now. The massive, dormant war machines within the Forge slowly came to life, their massive engines rumbling to life as if awakening from a long slumber. The Ashborn's fighters prepared for the worst, readying their ships for the battle that was sure to come. Then, the first wave of alien ships appeared in the distance. They were sleek, advanced vessels, far superior in design and firepower to the Ashborn's patched-together fleet. But the Ashborn had something the aliens did not, the will to survive and the heart to fight for their future. Elias was determined to make sure that nothing would stop them from reclaiming the universe for humanity. The battle began in earnest as the alien ships launched a barrage of fire, their weapons flashing through the cold expanse of space. But the Forge's ancient defenses flared to life, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that tore through the attacking fleet. The Ashborn fighters engaged the enemy, their smaller ships darting in and out of the chaos, using the asteroid fields and wreckage as cover. Elias watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the Nomad, his eyes narrowing as he observed the enemy's tactics. He knew the aliens would not give up easily, but the Ashborn were fighting with everything they had. The Forge was their only hope, there was no turning back now. Hours passed, and the battle raged on. The Ashborn's fleet was battered, but they held their ground, slowly wearing down the alien forces. Elias's voice crackled over the intercom, urging his crew to press on. "We are the last of our kind. We cannot lose here. We will not lose." And in the end, against all odds, the Ashborn triumphed. The alien fleet, battered and broken, retreated into the depths of space. The Forge was theirs. Exhausted but victorious, Elias stood at the command center, watching as his crew celebrated their hard-won victory. The Ashborn had reclaimed the Forge, but their journey was far from over. The universe was vast, and many challenges still lay ahead. But with the power of the Forge at their disposal, humanity had a chance, perhaps the last chance, to rise again. Elias Vorn knew that this was only the beginning. The Forge was a symbol, not just of their victory, but of their resilience and determination. Humanity had been knocked down, but they were not broken. They would rise from the ashes, and they would reclaim the universe. Together. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity was not just a memory, they were a force to be reckoned with.
The days following their victory in the Forge system were a blur of activity. Elias and the Ashborn had won their first major battle, but they knew the real test was yet to come. The alien empires, who had long underestimated humanity, would not simply allow them to reclaim their place in the universe without a fight. The galaxy had been reshaped in humanity's absence, and there were powerful forces who did not want to see them rise again. The Forge, with its ancient shipyards and advanced weaponry, gave the Ashborn a foothold in the vast expanse of space. But it was only a small part of the puzzle. The true power of the Forge was still hidden within its depths, a treasure trove of knowledge and technology that could tip the scales in their favor. But finding it would not be easy. The Forge was a labyrinth of forgotten corridors, each one more dangerous than the last. Yet Elias and his crew had come this far, and they were not about to back down. The Ashborn began a systematic exploration of the Forge's inner sanctums, unlocking secrets that had been buried for centuries. Elias tasked his most trusted engineers and scientists with studying the ancient technologies, hoping to uncover something that could give them the upper hand against the alien forces. But the more they discovered, the more they realized how little they knew about the true power of the Forge. One discovery, however, stood out. Deep within the heart of the Forge, they uncovered a control room unlike any other. Its walls were lined with strange symbols, and its central interface was a network of interconnected terminals, each one pulsing with an eerie, blue glow. The room seemed alive, as if it was waiting for someone to activate it. As Elias stood in front of the control panel, he could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. This was more than just a shipyard, it was a weapon, a tool capable of changing the course of the universe. But it was also a puzzle, and Elias knew that unlocking its secrets would require more than just brute force. It would take cunning, intelligence, and a deep understanding of the ancient technologies that had been left behind. The first few attempts to access the control room were met with failure. The interface seemed to reject every command they entered, as if it were designed to keep intruders out. But Elias was not one to give up easily. He spent hours poring over the symbols, trying to decipher their meaning. It was slow work, but eventually, he began to make progress. The symbols were not random, they were a form of code, a language that had been lost to time. After days of painstaking work, Elias finally cracked the code. The control room came to life, its systems waking from their long slumber. A holographic display flickered into existence, showing a map of the galaxy, one that had been drawn long before the fall of Earth. But what caught Elias's attention was not the map itself, it was the markings on it. Several planets, once thought to be uninhabited, were marked with an unusual symbol, the symbol of the Forge. Elias felt a surge of excitement. This was it, the key to humanity's future. The Forge was not just a place of refuge, it was the starting point for something much larger. These planets, these hidden worlds, were the final pieces of a puzzle that could restore humanity to its former glory. But Elias knew they were not the only ones who had discovered this secret. The alien fleets, although defeated for now, were still lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting for the Ashborn to make their next move. Elias could feel the tension in the air as he made the decision to mobilize his crew. The time had come to find the hidden worlds marked on the map and claim them for humanity. But Elias was no fool. He knew the risks. These planets were not uninhabited, they were likely home to powerful alien forces who would not take kindly to the Ashborn's arrival. The battle for the Forge had been hard enough, the battle for these planets would be even more brutal. The Ashborn set out in small, well-equipped teams, each one tasked with exploring one of the marked worlds. The mission was clear: find any remnants of ancient technology, secure valuable resources, and prepare for the inevitable conflict. The tension was palpable as the crews boarded their ships and prepared to venture into unknown space. Each team knew they were taking a gamble, but they also knew the stakes. Humanity's future depended on their success. As the Ashborn made their way to the first marked planet, Elias stood on the bridge of the Nomad, watching the stars stretch out before him. He had come a long way from the streets of the lunar colony, and now, he was leading humanity's last hope. The weight of that responsibility was heavy, but Elias had never been one to shy away from a challenge. If they were to rise from the ashes, they would do so together, no matter the cost. The first planet they arrived at was a barren, desolate world, its surface scarred by long-forgotten wars. But there, hidden beneath the rubble, were signs of life. Ancient structures, buried deep beneath the planet's surface, hummed with a faint energy, as though they were waiting to be rediscovered. Elias ordered his team to begin the excavation, knowing that what they uncovered could change everything. Days turned into weeks as the Ashborn dug deeper into the planet's surface, uncovering technology that had been lost for centuries. But they were not the only ones interested in the planet's secrets. The first signs of alien activity soon became apparent. Ships were spotted in the distance, monitoring their every move. Elias knew they had to act quickly. They had found something powerful, something the aliens wanted, and they would stop at nothing to take it from the Ashborn. The stage was set for a confrontation, one that would determine the future of humanity's struggle for survival. Elias rallied his crew once again, preparing them for the fight ahead. "We are not just fighting for survival anymore," he told them. "We are fighting for our place in the universe. And we will not back down." With the unknown planet beneath their feet and the looming alien threat overhead, the Ashborn prepared for the battle of their lives. Humanity's fate was in their hands, and there was no turning back now.
The tension aboard the Nomad was palpable. The Ashborn had found something extraordinary on the barren world, a weapon, or perhaps something even more powerful. Whatever it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and the alien forces closing in on them were all too aware of its significance. Elias Vorn knew that the fate of humanity depended on what they had uncovered. But with each passing hour, the pressure mounted, and the stakes grew higher. As the Ashborn excavated the ancient structures buried beneath the planet's surface, the mysterious energy signatures they had detected grew stronger. It was clear that they were on the verge of unlocking something of incredible power. But they were not alone. The alien ships, sleek and deadly, began to converge on the planet, their intentions clear. They were here to stop the Ashborn at any cost. Elias knew time was running out. The excavation teams worked around the clock, their progress slowed by the constant threat of alien forces lurking nearby. They could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on them. One wrong move, and everything they had worked for would be lost. The Ashborn's victory at the forge had been a hard-won triumph, but it had not erased the fact that they were still hunted, still outnumbered, and still fighting for survival. The aliens were relentless. Their ships were faster, more advanced, and better equipped than the Ashborn's patched-together fleet. But the Ashborn had something the aliens did not: determination. They fought not just for survival, but for their future, for a chance to reclaim what had been lost. Elias stood on the bridge of the Nomad, staring at the holographic map of the planet below. His thoughts were focused on the excavation teams. He knew that the key to humanity's rise was within their grasp, but he also knew that the aliens would not let them leave the planet alive. The Ashborn were surrounded on all sides, and the odds were stacked against them. But Elias had always thrived in the face of impossible odds. "We need to finish the excavation," Elias said, his voice firm. "Whatever it is down there, it's the key to winning this war. We can't afford to let the aliens get their hands on it." His voice carried through the ship's intercom, and his crew responded with the kind of fervor that had carried them this far. There was no turning back now. The planet beneath them was a battleground, and the Ashborn were ready to fight. In the depths of the planet's surface, the excavation teams made their final breakthrough. A massive underground chamber, hidden for centuries, was revealed. Inside, the teams uncovered an enormous crystalline structure, pulsing with energy. The object was a marvel of ancient engineering, a fusion of organic and technological components that seemed almost alive. Its purpose was unclear, but its power was undeniable. The energy emanating from the crystalline structure was unlike anything the Ashborn had ever encountered. It was both terrifying and beautiful, a force that could change the course of the galaxy. Elias felt a deep sense of awe as he gazed upon the discovery from the command center. The Ashborn had found something far beyond what they had expected, a weapon, yes, but also something that could give them the power to reclaim their place in the universe. But their discovery did not go unnoticed. The alien fleet, now within striking distance, began its attack. The first wave of ships descended upon the planet, their weapons firing with deadly precision. The Ashborn were forced to retreat, but not without a fight. The battle that ensued was chaotic, as both sides clashed in a desperate struggle for control. The Nomads' fighters engaged the enemy, their smaller ships darting in and out of the melee, using every scrap of technology at their disposal. The alien ships were formidable, but the Ashborn were fueled by the knowledge that this battle was their last chance to reclaim humanity's future. Elias issued orders from the bridge, his voice unwavering. "We hold them off at all costs. Protect the excavation teams. If we lose this, we lose everything." The Nomads' engines roared as it moved into position, taking on the full force of the alien fleet. The ship shuddered as enemy fire rained down, but Elias refused to back down. His crew fought with everything they had, knowing that their survival depended on the Ashborn's ability to outlast their enemies. It was a fight to the death, there was no surrender, no retreat. The battle raged on for hours, the sky above the planet flashing with the explosions of war. Elias's heart raced as he watched his crew push back against the alien onslaught. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and outclassed, but the Ashborn were not afraid. They had come too far to give up now. In the midst of the chaos, Elias's eyes were drawn to the crystalline structure below. The energy from the object was intensifying, and he could feel it, something was about to change. The Ashborn were on the brink of victory, but it was clear that the battle was far from over. The alien fleet, recognizing the threat, launched a final assault. But as they closed in on the planet, the crystalline structure began to hum with power. The ground shook, and a massive shockwave rippled through the atmosphere. The alien ships faltered, their systems glitching as the energy from the structure interfered with their technology. For a moment, the Ashborn had the upper hand. Elias seized the opportunity. "All ships, full assault. Now's our chance." The Ashborn fighters surged forward, unleashing everything they had. The alien fleet, already crippled by the shockwave, was overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught. One by one, the alien ships were torn apart, their defensive systems no match for the sheer force of the Ashborn's counterattack. But as the battle reached its climax, Elias felt a strange unease. The energy from the crystalline structure continued to build, becoming more unstable by the second. It was clear that the object was far more powerful than anyone had anticipated, far more dangerous. "We need to shut it down," Elias ordered. "Now!" But it was too late. The crystalline structure exploded with a deafening roar, sending a shockwave across the planet. The Ashborn were thrown off balance, their ships rattling in the wake of the blast. The alien fleet, already in disarray, was finished. As the dust settled and the last remnants of the battle faded into the void, Elias stood at the helm of the Nomad, staring out at the destruction. The Ashborn had won, but at what cost? The power they had unleashed could change the course of the universe, but it had come with consequences. The fight for humanity's future was far from over. The dust had barely settled from the violent clash when Elias stood amidst the wreckage, gazing out into the vast expanse of space. The explosion of the crystalline structure had torn apart much of the planet's surface, sending shockwaves through the surrounding system. The alien fleet had been decimated, but the cost of that victory weighed heavily on the Ashborn. The blast had affected the very fabric of their technology, and they knew it would take time to recover. But even in the face of such loss, there was no turning back now. They had uncovered a power that could reshape the galaxy, and humanity's place within it. Elias felt a deep sense of foreboding. While the battle had been won, the war was far from over. The Ashborn had earned their victory through sheer willpower, but they had unleashed something beyond their understanding. The crystalline structure, once thought to be a weapon, had proven to be far more volatile, more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. Its energy, while incapacitating the alien fleet, had also rendered much of their technology useless. The aftermath was a technological nightmare, with ships and systems malfunctioning across the fleet. But Elias was not one to dwell on defeat. "Prepare the fleet to move out," he ordered, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We can't afford to stay here any longer. The aliens will regroup, and we need to be ready." The command was issued, and the Ashborn began the painful task of salvaging what they could from the wreckage of their ships. Many of their advanced weapons were offline, and their communication systems had been compromised. But they were survivors. They had come from nothing, and they had faced down impossible odds. If there was one thing Elias knew, it was that they would rebuild. As the crew worked to make their ship space-worthy once again, Elias stood by the bridge, staring at the remnants of the crystalline structure. The explosion had torn it apart, but a faint trace of its energy still lingered in the air. He could feel it, a presence that seemed to resonate with the very core of his being. The object had been powerful, but it was also enigmatic. What had they awakened? What consequences would this power have on the galaxy, and on humanity? The answers seemed just out of reach. But Elias had never been one to shy away from the unknown. "We need to find out more about the power we've uncovered," he told his chief scientist, Dr. Kyra Wren. "There's something about it, something we're not seeing." Dr. Wren nodded, her face weary but determined. "The explosion sent out a burst of energy, Elias. We're still analyzing the data, but what we've seen so far suggests this is not a one-time event. The structure's energy field is like nothing we've ever encountered. It's as if it's alive, constantly shifting and adapting." Elias's gaze hardened. "Then we need to understand it before anyone else does." The Ashborn began to gather what little they could from the wreckage of the crystalline structure. Scientists, engineers, and technicians worked tirelessly, poring over the fragments to try and decipher the complex energy signatures. But as they delved deeper into their analysis, one thing became painfully clear: they were dealing with a force far beyond their comprehension. Meanwhile, the alien remnants, factions and remnants of fleets that had once dominated the galaxy, began to regroup. Though the Ashborn had struck a devastating blow, the battle for control of the galaxy was far from over. Elias knew that they would not have long before the enemy would come again. But there was hope. The Forge had given them the means to strike back. The Ashborn now had a fighting chance, if they could just figure out how to harness the power they had uncovered. For the next several weeks, the Ashborn focused on rebuilding. The Nomad was repaired, its systems slowly coming back online. The fleet, though battered, was ready to move once again. They would not sit idle while their enemies licked their wounds. Elias knew that the next phase of their journey would be just as dangerous as the one they had just survived. They were no longer just a ragtag group of survivors, they were a growing force, and that made them a target. As the Ashborn gathered their forces and prepared to venture deeper into the galaxy, Elias reflected on how far they had come. It had not been easy, and the battles they had fought were only the beginning. But with the power of the Forge and the mysterious energy they had unleashed, they now had the means to challenge the alien forces that had once dominated the universe. The tide was turning, and humanity was beginning to rise once more. But the galaxy was vast, and the enemy was not the only force in play. The Ashborn had made enemies, not only among the alien fleets but also within the galactic powers that ruled over vast territories. Some of these factions, long opposed to humanity's return, would see the Ashborn as a threat to their control. They would not stand idly by as humanity rose from the ashes. Elias knew this would not be a simple war, it would be a war of survival, a battle for their very right to exist. The Ashborn had the will to fight, but they needed allies. They needed the strength of other survivors, the unity of those who still believed in the promise of a free galaxy. Elias reached out to various factions, sending envoys and messengers to nearby star systems. They could not win this war alone. It was not long before their efforts bore fruit. Representatives from several surviving colonies responded to the Ashborn's call. They, too, had suffered under the alien yoke and had seen their worlds fall into darkness. The Ashborn offered a glimmer of hope, an alliance that could unite their strength and resources. It was a tentative partnership, but it was a start. The galaxy had not seen such unity in centuries. Elias stood at the head of the meeting, surrounded by the leaders of these new allies. It was a diverse group: humans, former colonies, and even a few isolated alien species who had long resisted the imperial rule. The room was filled with an air of cautious optimism, but Elias could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. It was up to him to forge a path to victory, to rally these fractured factions into a cohesive force that could stand against the alien threat. "This is just the beginning," Elias said, his voice steady as he addressed the room. "The universe is vast, and there will be challenges ahead. But together, we have the strength to reclaim our place in it. We will rise from the ashes, and we will not fall again." The room erupted into applause. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The Ashborn were no longer just survivors, they were leaders of a growing movement, a force to be reckoned with. And the war to reclaim the universe had only just begun. The alliance between the Ashborn and their new allies marked a turning point in humanity's struggle for dominance in the galaxy. While the initial victory had been won through sheer determination and the devastating power of the crystalline structure, the battle to reclaim the universe was far from over. The alien forces, while decimated, were not gone. And the factions that had once held sway over the galaxy's many systems were beginning to take notice of the growing coalition. The Ashborn success had stirred something ancient, an uneasy shift in the balance of power that was felt across the stars. With new allies at their side, Elias Vorn was faced with a new challenge: how to unite this patchwork of factions, each with its own agenda, into a force capable of challenging the alien empires that still held much of the galaxy's heart. The road ahead was treacherous, with betrayal, old grudges, and political maneuvering threatening to tear apart the fragile coalition. But Elias had a vision, one of a united front, standing together against the cosmic forces that sought to extinguish humanity's light. The Ashborn's first mission after the formation of the Alliance was clear: they had to strike a blow against the alien empires that still controlled vital territories. The Forge had given them the means to launch an offensive, but their fleet remained fractured, and many of the new allies were still adjusting to the harsh realities of war. Elias knew that time was of the essence. They couldn't afford to let their enemies regroup. Their first target was a key planet in the Outer Rim, a former stronghold of the alien forces that had long acted as a staging ground for further invasions. Intelligence had suggested that the planet was heavily fortified, with a fleet of alien warships in orbit. But the Ashborn had one advantage: the crystalline structure. While its full potential was still unknown, they had learned enough to use its energy to power their weapons and shields in ways that no other faction in the galaxy had ever done before. The Ashborn had a technological edge, and Elias intended to use it to its fullest. As the fleet assembled, Elias stood on the bridge of the Nomad, watching as the warships readied themselves for battle. The Ashborn had come a long way since the Forge, and this mission would be their first true test as a unified force. It was a high-stakes operation, one that would determine not only their survival but their ability to take the fight to the heart of the alien empires. "All ships, prepare for battle," Elias ordered, his voice steady. "We move out in 10 minutes. This is our chance to strike at the heart of the enemy." The fleet set course for the Outer Rim, each ship brimming with the determination of those who knew what was at stake. They had come together from different corners of the galaxy, each one a survivor, each one with a stake in the future. The Ashborn were no longer just a group of warriors, they were the spark that could ignite a revolution. The journey to the Outer Rim was long and fraught with tension. The crew aboard the Nomad worked tirelessly, ensuring that their technology was in top condition. The crystalline power source, though potent, was still unpredictable, and they had to ensure that their ships would be able to handle the strain. As they neared their target, Elias felt a sense of anticipation mixed with caution. This was it, the moment that would determine their place in the galaxy. As they approached the planet's atmosphere, the enemy fleet was visible, a sprawling armada that dwarfed the Ashborn's forces. The alien warships were massive, their sleek designs reflecting the cold efficiency of an empire that had ruled with an iron fist. But Elias's gaze remained unwavering. He had seen such odds before, and the Ashborn had always triumphed. This time would be no different. The first volley of fire from the alien fleet streaked across the void, impacting the shields of the Ashborn ships. The Nomad shook under the force, but the shields held firm. The crystalline energy, infused into the ship's systems, absorbed the brunt of the impact. Elias's heart raced, but he remained calm. The Ashborn had the advantage, now they had to press it. "Return fire," Elias commanded. "Target their lead ships." The battle erupted in full force, the clash of titanic fleets shaking the very stars. The Ashborn's weapons, powered by the crystalline energy, tore through the alien ships with terrifying precision. The once formidable alien fleet began to falter, their ships buckling under the relentless assault. But the enemy was far from defeated. They retaliated with a fury, launching wave after wave of ships toward the Ashborn fleet. The battle raged for hours, with both sides taking heavy losses. The Ashborn had the edge in technology, but the alien forces were formidable, using every dirty trick in the book to try and gain the upper hand. But the Ashborn were not just fighting for victory, they were fighting for their future, for the right to exist in the galaxy they had been cast out of for so long. Amidst the chaos, Elias's voice rang out over the intercom, giving orders with the precision of a seasoned commander. "Hold the line. Do not let them breach our defenses. We have to break through." The tide of battle was shifting. The alien fleet, once proud and confident, was now on the back foot. Their warships, though powerful, could not withstand the might of the Ashborn's new technology. One by one, the alien ships began to fall, their weapons failing, their shields crumbling beneath the onslaught. The Ashborn pressed forward, pushing deeper into the heart of the enemy's forces. But just as victory seemed within reach, Elias received a transmission. It was a distress call, a message from one of their allied fleets that had been flanked by enemy reinforcements. They were in danger of being overrun. "Damn it," Elias muttered under his breath, his heart racing. The battle was not yet won. They had to secure this victory, but the war was far from over. He quickly issued new orders. "All ships, pull back," Elias commanded. "We're not done here. We take their forces, or we don't leave." The Ashborn fleet began a tactical retreat, regrouping with their allies. As they withdrew, the aliens pursued, hoping to crush the Ashborn in one fell swoop. But Elias had a plan, an ambush. The alien fleet was scattered, and the Ashborn's fighters, using the terrain of nearby asteroid fields, set up a deadly trap. The final engagement was swift. As the alien fleet closed in, the Ashborn turned and unleashed a devastating counteroffensive. The alien ships, overextended and disoriented, fell in droves. The Ashborn fleet's new weapons, coupled with their tactical superiority, shattered the remnants of the enemy's forces. When the last of the alien ships was reduced to debris, Elias allowed himself a brief moment of relief. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The Ashborn had struck a decisive blow, but the galaxy was still full of enemies, and there was still much work to be done. As Elias stood on the bridge of the Nomad, looking out at the smoking wreckage of the alien fleet, he knew that the Ashborn had taken their first step toward reclaiming the universe. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was just beginning to rise. In the aftermath of the battle, the stars seemed quieter, but the tension in the galaxy had only just begun to build. The Ashborn's victory in the Outer Rim was a significant one, a signal to all factions in the galaxy that humanity was no longer just a fleeting thought. They had come from the ashes of extinction, and now, they were a force to be reckoned with. The victory had given the Ashborn a reputation, not just as survivors, but as conquerors, a force capable of facing the most advanced alien empires head-on and emerging victorious. The aftermath of the battle was not without its cost. The Ashborn fleet, though triumphant, had suffered heavy casualties, and the damage to their ships was significant. The crystalline power source that had given them the advantage was now depleted, and the technology they had so carefully cultivated was in need of repair. But despite these setbacks, there was a sense of unity among the Ashborn and their allies. They had struck the first blow, and now they had to capitalize on it. Elias Vorn, standing in the command center of the Nomad, knew that the victory they had won was only the beginning. The alien empires that controlled vast regions of the galaxy would not take this defeat lightly. The Ashborn had proven their worth in battle, but the war for the future of humanity would require more than just strength, it would require strategy, alliances, and the ability to adapt to the shifting tides of galactic politics. As the Ashborn began to regroup and rebuild, Elias called a meeting with the leaders of their alliance. The survivors of the various factions, now unified in their struggle, gathered in the war room aboard the Nomad. Elias surveyed the room, his gaze sweeping over the representatives of the diverse groups that had come together under his banner. Humans, former colonists, and even alien species that had been long oppressed by the same empires that had once sought to destroy humanity, all of them stood together in this fight. "We've won a battle," Elias began, his voice steady and filled with resolve. "But the war is far from over. The alien empires will not stand idly by while we take their worlds. They will regroup, rebuild, and come after us. We cannot afford to rest on our laurels." The room was filled with murmurs of agreement. The alliances between the factions were fragile, built on mutual necessity rather than trust, but they had come together for a common cause. They knew that the Ashborn had something that the rest of the galaxy needed: hope. "We've already taken the first step," Elias continued. "But we need to be strategic. We need to strike at the heart of the alien empires, disrupt their infrastructure, and destabilize their control over the galaxy. Our victories will inspire others to join us, but we have to show them that we are a legitimate threat." He turned to Dr. Kyra Wren, the chief scientist, who had become one of his closest advisors. She had been instrumental in understanding the true potential of the crystalline structure and its energy. It was her work that had turned the tide of the battle, and now, it was her knowledge that would guide the next steps. "Dr. Wren," Elias said, "how long before we can get the crystalline energy back online? We need that power to keep pushing forward." Dr. Wren stood, her eyes tired but filled with determination. "We've made some progress, Elias. The energy is still volatile, but we've managed to stabilize a small portion of it. It's enough to power our weapons for now, but we need more time to fully harness it. If we push it too hard, we risk overloading the systems, and we'll lose everything." Elias nodded, understanding the danger. The crystalline energy was both a blessing and a curse. Its power was immense, but it came with unpredictable risks. They had to balance its use carefully, or it could turn against them. "What's our next move?" one of the Alliance leaders asked, a grizzled veteran from one of the outer colonies. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to come at us again." Elias took a deep breath, looking over the map of the galaxy that spread before them. The alien empires were vast, their territory stretching across hundreds of star systems. But they were not invincible. The Ashborn had learned that, and they would use that knowledge to their advantage. "We hit them where it hurts," Elias replied. "Their supply lines, their communication networks. We need to sever their ability to coordinate and fight back. If we can disrupt their power structure, we can take down the empires one system at a time. But we'll need more than just brute force. We need intelligence, strategy, and the cooperation of all our allies." There was silence in the room as the leaders considered his words. They knew that the Ashborn were right. They had won a battle, but they had not yet won the war. The next phase of their campaign would require precision, the kind of tactical genius that Elias had shown in the heat of battle. And with their allies by their side, they had the opportunity to make their mark on the galaxy. As the meeting continued, plans were drawn up for the next stage of their campaign. The Ashborn would target key systems, disrupt trade routes, and destabilize the alien empire's economies. They would not just fight, they would bleed the empires dry, forcing them to stretch their resources thin. Every victory would be a step closer to total liberation. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, whispers of the Ashborn's success began to spread. In the shadowy corners of space, where resistance movements had been crushed and freedom seemed like a distant dream, a flicker of hope ignited. The galaxy was waking up, and humanity was leading the charge. The Ashborn knew that the battles ahead would be harder, the losses greater. But they were no longer just a scattered group of survivors. They were a symbol of defiance, a force that had come from nothing and was now shaking the foundations of the galaxy. Elias stood at the command center, looking out at the stars. He knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of certainty. Humanity was rising from the ashes, and they would not be silenced again. The galaxy was vast, and the war was far from over. But humanity had found its place in the universe, and they were not going to let anyone take it away. With the Ashborn united and their allies gathered, they set their sights on the future, a future where humanity would reclaim the stars and take its rightful place among the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. The rise of humanity had begun, and nothing would stand in their way.